A man doesn't fall in love when you chase him, fix him, or make yourself smaller for him. He falls when he sees something in you that he can't find anywhere else. A quiet strength, a calm truth, a presence that makes him want to rise, not run. And sometimes all it takes is one moment, one look, one act of grace to change the entire direction of his heart. When you give him peace instead of chaos, you offer something the world has forgotten how to give. We live in a time where noise is constant. Noise in our minds, noise in our hearts, noise in the expectations that press against us every day. A man may walk with strength on the outside, but inside he often carries storms no one sees. He carries the weight of every fear he never voiced, every insecurity he never admitted, every wound he never allowed to bleed in front of another soul. And most of the time, he is not searching for someone to fix him or rescue him. He is searching for someone who allows him to exhale, someone who softens the harshness of the world just by being near. And when he finds that in you, peace, gentleness, steadiness, it awakens something deep inside him, something ancient and instinctive. Peace is not silence. It is not swallowing your truth or pretending everything is fine. Peace is connection. It is the ability to listen with intention, to understand without judging, to stand beside him without doubling the weight he already carries. There are women who bring fire and women who bring light. Fire can warm a moment, but light can guide a lifetime. A man never forgets the woman who gives him the kind of peace that feels like a home he never knew existed. It is in the way you speak to him, not with sharpness, but with sincerity. It is in the way you give him space to breathe and return without fear of punishment. It is in the way you hear what he doesn't say, because not all battles come with sound. There are men who grew up learning to be strong in all the wrong ways. They were told not to cry, not to break, not to feel. So when they stumble into a woman who doesn't demand perfection from them, who doesn't see vulnerability as weakness but as humanity, they start to unravel in the gentlest way, not in collapse, but in release. They begin to trust, to open, to reveal their unspoken truths. They fall in love with the woman who makes it safe to be real. I once listened to a man speak about the woman he married. He said she wasn't the most glamorous woman he dated, nor the one who challenged him with drama or intensity. She was the one who, during the hardest year of his life, sat with him in silence and placed her hand on his shoulder. She didn't ask him to talk before he was ready. She didn't punish him for withdrawing. She simply stayed. He said in that moment he realized she was peace in human form, and he knew he wanted that peace forever. Peace is not a strategy. It is not a performance. It is something that flows naturally when you are rooted in your own emotional balance. A woman who knows herself, who regulates her emotions, who speaks with intention rather than impulse. She brings stability to every room she enters. And men, even the strongest, are drawn to that kind of steady presence. Because he is already fighting battles outside, he does not want to fight wars at home. When you give him peace instead of chaos, you show him that love does not have to bruise, does not have to shout, does not have to destroy before it heals. You show him that love can be gentle and still powerful, soft and still strong. You teach him that the heart is not a battlefield, but a sanctuary. And this changes everything. Because chaos sparks passion, but peace sparks devotion. Chaos excites for a moment, but peace humbles for a lifetime. This is why a man falls deeply, undeniably in love with the woman who gives him what the world cannot: rest for his spirit. Not the kind that puts him to sleep, but the kind that awakens him, calms him, steadies him, aligns him with who he wants to become. Peace becomes the mirror that reflects back to him a better version of himself. And in that reflection, he sees the woman who made it possible. When you believe in his purpose, you awaken something inside him that even he may have forgotten existed. Every man walks through life with a quiet calling etched into his spirit. Sometimes it's clear, burning like a flame he can't ignore. Other times it lies buried under years of doubt, failure, or the silence of a world that never bothered to listen. But deep within every man, no matter how confident, no matter how uncertain, there is a yearning to become what he was meant to be. And when he meets a woman who can see that calling, who can recognize the direction of his life even when he has lost sight of it, something inside him shifts. The ground beneath his feet becomes steadier. The voice inside his heart grows stronger. He begins to rise. A man may look like he has everything together, strong shoulders, steady posture, controlled expression, but many times he is standing on a foundation built from his own willpower, not affirmation. He knows where he wants to go, but he fears that he may never get there. He doesn't say this out loud. He rarely shares the full weight of his insecurities, yet they sit inside him like stones. So when a woman steps into his life and sees beyond the surface, beyond his mistakes, beyond his doubts, and says through her actions, "I see who you're becoming," she becomes a source of strength he never knew he needed. Believing in his purpose does not mean carrying him. It does not mean sacrificing your own direction so he can find his. It means standing beside him with a steady, grounded presence. It means seeing what is possible, not just what is visible. It means speaking to the greatness inside him, even when the world only sees his flaws. And there is a particular power in this kind of belief, a power that reshapes a man's view of himself. Is sometimes the only thing that separates a man from who he is and who he could be is the presence of one person who believes he can make it. There was a story of a young man trying to build a small business. He worked long hours, faced financial setbacks, and saw more closed doors than open ones. Many around him told him to give up, to choose something safer, to accept that some dreams were too big. But the woman he loved looked at him and said, "I don't care how long it takes. I believe you have something the world will recognize one day." She didn't throw herself into the struggle for him. She didn't fix everything. She simply believed, clearly, consistently, quietly. Years later, when his business grew into something far greater than he imagined, he told a friend that her belief was the anchor during the storms. He said, "It wasn't success that made me love her more. It was the fact that she believed in me before success existed." Belief is a rare gift. The world is full of critics, but scarce in encouragers. Most people see only what is present. Very few see what is possible. So when a man encounters someone whose belief is not based on his current results, but on the deeper pull of his purpose, it shakes him, it humbles him, it inspires him to rise to meet the version of himself that you already see. And this creates a bond that is not built on emotional intensity or temporary chemistry. It is built on spiritual recognition. But believing in his purpose does not mean blind loyalty. It is not about supporting recklessness or encouraging a path that leads to destruction. It means supporting a direction that carries truth, integrity, and meaning. It means recognizing the authenticity of what he is chasing. It means aligning with the things that bring him alive, not the things that drain him. And when your belief is rooted in wisdom, it becomes nourishing rather than enabling. There is something profoundly human about wanting to be understood, truly understood. For a man, being understood in terms of his purpose touches a place deeper than affection. It reaches into his identity. Because purpose is not a hobby or a task. It is the reason he wakes up, the reason he fights, the reason he pushes forward even when everything inside him says stop. When you believe in that purpose, you become part of the force that keeps him moving. You become part of the story he tells when he speaks of the people who made him who he is. Imagine a man whose purpose is to create art or build a company or serve his community, or simply become a better version of himself. Imagine him working, struggling, facing setbacks, climbing what feels like a mountain with no end. And beside him stands a woman who doesn't pressure him to be perfect, who doesn't mock his ambitions, who doesn't compare him to others. Instead, she encourages him when he feels small. She reminds him of why he started when he feels lost. She holds the vision with him when the world clouds it. She becomes the echo of hope when his own voice wavers. That kind of support isn't ordinary. It doesn't fade with time. It becomes part of the foundation of his devotion. Many men fall in love with beauty, but they stay in love with purpose. They stay with the woman who sees more in them than meets the eye, the woman who pushes them toward growth without control, the woman who strengthens them without shouting, the woman whose belief creates a quiet fire inside them. Because purpose is sacred, and when you honor a man's purpose, you touch the deepest part of him, and something else happens. The more you believe in him, the more he begins to believe in himself. The more you see the greatness inside him, the more he begins to live in alignment with it. He becomes more disciplined, more focused, more intentional, not because you demanded it, but because he wants to rise to match the vision you have of him. Your belief becomes a mirror reflecting his potential back to him. Your support becomes a wind pushing his sails forward, and he will never forget the one who helped him reach the places he once feared he'd never touch. A man can achieve much on his own, but when he is loved by someone who believes in his purpose, he becomes unstoppable. And that kind of love is not just romantic, it is transformational, it is rare, it is timeless. It is the kind that leaves a mark on his life and shapes the man he becomes. When you hold your standards with grace, something extraordinary happens, not just around you, but within the men who encounter you. There's a certain quiet power in a woman who knows what she deserves and carries that truth like a soft but unshakable flame. It's not loud, it's not forceful, it's not dressed in arrogance, it's steady, calm, almost peaceful. Yet it shifts the entire atmosphere of a relationship. Men feel it immediately, even if they can't explain it. It's like walking into a room and sensing a presence that grounds you without demanding anything. A presence that says, I know who I am, I know what I will accept, and I know what I won't. There's a difference between standards and walls. Walls shut people out. Standards guide them in. They don't come from pride, they come from clarity. And clarity, true clarity, comes from experience, reflection, and sometimes heartbreak. A woman doesn't develop standards because she's difficult. She develops them because she's learned. She's learned that her energy is not free. She's learned that her time is not something others can casually take. She's learned that her heart is not a playground or a testing ground. She's learned that good love requires effort, intention, consistency, and honesty, and she refuses to entertain anything less. What men respond to is not the rules you set, but the way you live by them. You don't have to preach your standards. You don't have to lay them out in a list or recite them like a script. They live in your actions. They show in the way you walk away from situations that drain you. They echo through the silence you choose instead of chasing someone who treats you as an option. They shine in your willingness to wait for what aligns with your values instead of settling for what is easy. There's a man who once said, "She didn't get angry when I was inconsistent. She just stopped giving me access." That was the moment he realized she wasn't playing games. She simply valued herself too much to participate in anything less than respect. And standing in the wake of her absence, he felt something he didn't expect. Admiration. Real, deep admiration. He said it was the first time he understood what standards look like when they're woven with grace instead of ego. Standards held with grace don't push people away. They filter them. The wrong men won't stay, but the right man won't leave. And that's the beauty of it. You don't have to figure out who's genuine and who's temporary. Your standards do that for you. A man who's not ready for depth will naturally fall away. A man who fears accountability will drift towards someone who lets him avoid himself. A man who only wants convenience will choose comfort over challenge. But a man who's ready, really ready, will lean in. He'll rise because he recognizes that your standards aren't obstacles, they're invitations. Invitations to grow, to show up with honesty, to evolve into someone stronger, steadier, more intentional. There's a quiet mystery to a woman who holds her standards gently. She doesn't judge, she doesn't insult, she doesn't belittle. She doesn't shame a man for not being ready. She just stays aligned with what she knows she deserves. And alignment is powerful. It's like gravity. It pulls the right people in and lets the wrong ones drift away without conflict. She isn't trying to change anyone. She's simply choosing herself. And choosing yourself is one of the deepest expressions of strength. Sometimes a man doesn't realize how much he needed a woman with standards until he meets one. At first, he might find her intimidating, not because she's harsh, but because she sees straight through pretense. Men don't fall in love with perfection, they fall in love with clarity, with a woman who says, I won't compete for your attention, I won't beg for effort, I won't explain what should be obvious. A woman who moves like someone who knows her worth. It's not a performance, it's an inner posture. And men respond to that with a mix of respect and curiosity. There's something undeniably attractive about someone who doesn't need to be chosen because she has already chosen herself. Someone who knows her heart is valuable, not because someone told her, but because she's learned to protect it. And that kind of woman doesn't crumble when someone walks away. She understands that distance can be a form of clarity. She understands that letting go can be a form of wisdom. She understands that loss isn't always a wound. Sometimes it's a doorway. Holding your standards with grace also teaches a man something he may have forgotten, that love is not supposed to feel like chaos. It's not supposed to be confusion, inconsistency, mixed signals, or emotional guessing games. Love is supposed to be steady, supportive, and growing. And when he sees that you refuse to accept anything less, he begins to reflect on himself. He begins to notice where he falls short, not because you pointed it out, but because your presence reveals it without you having to say a word. Your standards awaken his awareness. Your grace awakens his desire to rise. Over time, a man will fall in love with the way you hold yourself, with your restraint, with your confidence, with your refusal to be shaken by temporary emotions, with your ability to stay soft without becoming weak. Softness, when paired with standards, is one of the rarest combinations a man will ever encounter. It disarms him, it humbles him, it draws him in, slowly, steadily, deeply. Because softness without standards becomes vulnerability without protection, but standards without softness become rigidity without connection. When you carry both, you become unforgettable. The truth is, standards aren't about controlling anyone. They're about honoring yourself. They're about creating relationships built on mutual effort. They're about protecting your peace. And when you hold them with grace, without anger, without bitterness, without resentment, you elevate the entire dynamic. You become a source of emotional clarity. You become a reminder of what real connection feels like. You become a mirror that reflects what is possible when two people meet each other with maturity and care. A man doesn't fall in love because you lower your standards for him. He falls in love because your standards challenge him to rise into the man he's capable of becoming. He falls in love because you make him feel like better is possible. He falls in love because you don't force him, you inspire him. And that inspiration is born from the grace with which you carry yourself. When you hold your standards with grace, you become a lighthouse, steady, unshaken, guiding, never chasing. And the right man, he will find his way to you, not because you demanded it, but because he recognized that a woman like you is rare. A woman like you is intention wrapped in kindness, strength wrapped in gentleness, clarity wrapped in warmth. And love rooted in that kind of foundation is the kind a man never forgets, never risks, and never lets go of. When you bring out his better self, you touch a part of him that he may have kept hidden for years, maybe even from himself. Most men live behind quiet walls. They don't always say what weighs on them, and they rarely admit what they fear. They move through life trying to be strong, to be reliable, to be enough. But beneath all that effort, there is always another version of him, waiting to be found. The man he hopes he can be, the man he imagines in the silence of late nights, the man he sometimes doubts he'll ever truly become. And when he meets a woman whose presence pulls that version of him forward, something shifts, not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. There's a strength you carry when you inspire him, not through pressure, not through demands, but through the way you live, the way you think, the way you love. It's almost like your presence holds up a mirror he's never looked into before. And for the first time, he sees the possibility of becoming someone greater, someone kinder, someone more grounded. It's not that he's trying to impress you, though yes, that's part of it. It's that you show him the kind of life he could have if he rises to match the energy you bring. Men don't always grow because they want to. Sometimes they grow because someone enters their life who makes growth feel natural, effortless, even necessary. The right woman doesn't drag him to become better. She wakes something inside him that was asleep. She becomes the reason he checks himself before he reacts. The reason he thinks twice before repeating old patterns. The reason he starts seeing his future more clearly. He becomes the spark that lights a fire he carries forward on his own. There's a certain magic in that. It happens in quiet moments more than big ones. Maybe it's the way you speak to him, not with judgment, but with sincerity. Maybe it's the way you encourage him, not by telling him what to do, but by reminding him of who he can be. Maybe it's how you hold your own life with intention, showing him what it looks like to live with purpose and self-respect. Men watch more than they admit. They internalize more than they show. A woman who moves with intention, who sets the tone of her own life, becomes a silent blueprint for the man beside her. There's a story I once heard about a man who struggled with anger. Not the explosive kind, but the simmering kind. The kind that comes from years of holding everything inside. He wasn't proud of it, and he knew it scared people away. But the woman he loved didn't shame him for it. She didn't excuse it either. She simply held a standard and offered a calm, compassionate presence. She showed him what patience looked like, what forgiveness felt like, what emotional balance could be. And slowly he found himself becoming the kind of man who could communicate instead of erupt. Years later, he said, "She didn't fix me. She reminded me that I wasn't meant to stay broken." That's what bringing out a man's better self looks like. Not stepping into his darkness for him, but shining enough light for him to walk out on his own. In many ways, men don't fall in love with perfection. They fall in love with transformation. They fall in love with the woman who meets them where they are, but believes in where they can go. A woman who doesn't settle for their excuses, but also doesn't punish them for their flaws. A woman who sees their potential with both honesty and compassion. That combination is powerful, it's rare, and it changes the entire dynamic of the relationship. Sometimes the right woman makes a man want to heal, not because she asks him to, but because he wants to be the version of himself she sees. He wants to be the man who deserves her loyalty, her softness, her effort. He wants to be the man who listens, who leads with intention, who communicates openly, who loves without fear. It isn't about perfection, It's about direction. And when he feels supported, not controlled, encouraged, not nagged, understood, not analyzed, he steps into the journey willingly. You might not even notice the impact you have. You might think you're just being yourself. But maybe he starts showing up a little earlier because he knows your time matters. Maybe he becomes more thoughtful with his words because you've shown him what emotional safety looks like. Maybe he starts taking better care of his dreams because you remind him they're worth protecting. Maybe he begins handling conflict with more maturity because you've shown him what calm communication feels like. Little by little, he becomes more of the man he wants to be, not for you, but because of you. And the beautiful thing is, he doesn't lose himself in the process. He finds himself. Because the better version of him was always inside. He just needed the right environment to surface, the right energy, the right connection, the right mirror. When you bring out his better self, you help him rewrite narratives that he thought were permanent. Maybe he grew up thinking vulnerability makes him weak. You show him it's a doorway to trust. Maybe he believed anger was the only language he knew. You show him how to soften without losing strength. Maybe he convinced himself that dreams become useless after failure. You remind him that purpose doesn't die. It just waits. Maybe he thought love had to be complicated. You show him that love can be steady, clear, safe. Men treasure the woman who makes them better, not because she tries to change them, but because she reminds them they are capable of becoming more. She stands beside them, not above them. She encourages without controlling. She pushes them without shoving. She inspires without intimidating. When a man realizes that he is growing into a stronger, kinder, more focused version of himself with you, he doesn't want to lose you, because losing you would feel like losing the path back to himself, losing the progress, losing the clarity, losing the sense of direction that your presence brought into his life. So he loves deeper. He shows up. He invests. He commits, not out of fear, but out of gratitude, out of recognition, out of admiration. Bringing out his better self is one of the most intimate ways you can love a man. And what makes it even more beautiful is that as he grows, he begins to bring out the better version of you too. That is what a real connection does. It elevates both souls. It creates something honest, something rooted, something worth holding on to, something that doesn't burn out, but evolve. When you love yourself first, something changes in the way the world responds to you. People feel it before you say a word. There's a kind of quiet confidence that comes from truly valuing who you are, from knowing your own worth without waiting for someone else to define it. And the most surprising part is this: when you finally choose to love yourself first, you don't push love away. You draw it toward you in a deeper, more powerful form than ever before, especially from a man who is ready, who is aware, who is searching for something real. Loving yourself first isn't arrogance. It isn't selfishness. It's understanding that you can't pour from an empty heart and you can't give from a place that's broken. It's recognizing that your value doesn't diminish when someone fails to see it. It's choosing to stand tall even when someone tries to shrink you. And when a man sees a woman who carries herself with that kind of grounded strength, he doesn't see someone who doesn't need him. He sees someone worth rising for. There's a moment in every person's life when the world tries to convince them to settle, to take whatever attention is offered, to accept whatever form of love comes easiest. But a woman who loves herself first rejects that, not with bitterness, not with anger, but with clarity. She knows her energy is not a convenience. She knows her peace is priceless. She knows she would rather walk alone in truth than stay with someone who treats her like an option. And that choice, that courage, it creates a shift. When a man meets a woman who loves herself first, he notices something different in her. She's not chasing validation. She's not trying to prove her worth. She's not afraid to walk away from what doesn't match her spirit. And that makes him pay attention. It makes him reflect. It makes him realize that if he wants to be part of her life, he has to show up with intention, not inconsistency, because she won't be impressed by excuses. She won't settle for almost. She won't stay where she's undervalued. There was a man who once said he fell for a woman not because she needed him, but because she didn't. He said the way she carried herself made him want to earn his place beside her. She didn't test him. She didn't challenge him through games. She challenged him by being whole. That kind of presence doesn't intimidate the right man. It inspires him. Loving yourself first also teaches a man something important, that love should add to your life, not consume it. It should support your growth, not replace your identity. It should feel like partnership, not possession. A woman who loves herself first is not afraid to let a man in. But she won't lose herself in the process. She keeps her dreams alive. She nurtures her passions. She takes care of her peace. And she expects the same effort and respect in return. Men are drawn to women who have depth, women who have direction, women who live with purpose. When you love yourself first, you naturally create those qualities. You become more intentional in your choices, more secure in your boundaries, more selective with your energy. And the man who is worth loving will meet you in that space. He will admire the way you care for your mind, your heart, your soul. He will respect the way you protect your boundaries. He will value the balance you bring into his life. And here's the beautiful irony. When you love yourself first, you love others better. You don't cling, you don't force, you don't settle. Your love becomes a choice, not a need. It becomes stronger because it's given from a full heart, not a wounded one. A man who experiences that kind of love feels something rare, something safe, something honest, something freeing. You become the woman who doesn't just want love, you elevate it, you define its tone, you guide its direction, and that is something unforgettable. So when you love yourself first, you become the calm in your own life. You become the strength you once looked for in others. You become the healing you thought someone else owed you. And the right man, the man who is ready for a real connection, will not only be drawn to that, he will honor it, because he will see clearly that the love you carry within you doesn't just make your life better, it makes his better too. Man falls in love when you touch not just his heart, but his life. When he finds peace in your presence, when you believe in his purpose, when your standards remind him to be better, when you inspire his growth, and when your self-love teaches him what real love looks like. The right man won't just love you, he'll treasure you, protect you, choose you in every season. Because when you do these things, you don't just enter his life, you transform it.